Welcome to Module 2 of the Qlause Internal Auditor course. Module 1 gave you the foundations, what an audit is, the three types, the vocabulary, and the principles. This module lifts you one level up to the thing that commissions audits in the first place, the audit program, covered by Clause 5 of ISO 19011. We will work through program objectives, risk-based scheduling, the on-site versus remote versus hybrid decision, resources, roles and records, and then monitoring, review, and improvement. As always, a reminder on method. The time allocated to this module covers the whole approach. You read the module in the study guide. You read Clause 5 in your own licensed copy of the standard. You watch this video, and then you take the quiz. This video is the guided lesson inside that method, not a replacement for the reading. After this module, you will be able to do 5 things. Set audit program objectives that serve the organization's objectives rather than the calendar. Build a risk-based program, deciding what gets audited, how often, how deeply, and by which method. Make the on-site, remote, or hybrid decision deliberately, per audit, on the basis of risk and evidence quality. Resource the program properly and manage its records. And monitor, review, and improve the program itself, which is simply plan, do, check, act applied to auditing. Here is the sentence to take away from this whole module. Individual audits are only as good as the program that commissions them. The program decides what gets audited, when, how deeply, by whom, and by what method. Get that wrong, and you can have excellent auditors doing excellent work on entirely the wrong targets, a busy program producing very little knowledge. ISO 19011 treats program management as a discipline in its own right, with its own plan, do, check, act cycle. And the 2026 edition sharpens the ambition considerably. The program should support the organization's decision-making, not merely tick the Audits Done box for Clause 9.2 of ISO 9001. So let us look at that cycle. There are 4 stations, and they run continuously. Establish. You set the objectives of the program, and you identify the risks and opportunities of the program itself, not of the processes you will audit, but of the program as a thing that can succeed or fail. Implement. You build the schedule, assign competent auditors, and manage the results as they come in. Monitor. You track program indicators, auditor performance, and feedback from the people being audited. Review and improve. You look at trends and lessons across the whole cycle, and you feed that into management review. Then the loop closes. What the review tells you becomes the input to the next establish. If your program runs the first 2 stations and skips the last 2, you do not have a managed program, you have a schedule. Start with objectives, because everything downstream is derived from them. Program objectives translate the question, why do we audit, into direction. Here is a weak one. Audit all departments annually. That is not an objective. It is a habit written in the objective box. Nothing follows from it. It cannot tell you which process deserves 2 days and which deserves 2 hours, or which auditor to send. Now compare a strong set. Verify the controls on our top 5 quality risks. Confirm readiness for the ISO 9001-2026 transition audit. Test the effectiveness of last year's corrective actions. Provide management with a trustworthy picture of process health. Objectives like these make every downstream decision, schedule, depth, auditor assignment, derivable rather than arbitrary. When someone challenges why a process is being audited twice this year, the objective answers for you. Which brings us to risk-based programming. The flat annual calendar. Every process, once a year, at the same depth. Audits habit rather than risk. Build the schedule from 4 inputs instead. First, process criticality. What is the impact on customers, on compliance, and on the organization's objectives if this process fails? Second, change. New lines, new systems, new sites, new people, new requirements. And yes, a new edition of ISO 9001 counts as change. Change is where controls have not yet been proven. Third, history. Previous findings, customer complaints, and the direction your KPI trends are moving. Fourth, maturity. A stable, clean process has earned a lighter touch. A struggling one has earned depth and frequency. Those 4 inputs taken together tell you where to spend your audit days. Let us make that concrete with 4 worked examples, because this is the part people find hardest to picture. Final assembly feeds 80% of revenue, and the last audit found 5 nonconformities. Audit it twice this cycle, at full day depth, with your strongest auditor pair. Payroll is stable with 0 findings in 3 cycles. A light touch remote audit, half a day, once. A new ERP goes live in the 2nd quarter. Schedule a targeted audit 6 to 8 weeks after go live. Scope to the order to delivery data flow. Early enough to matter, late enough that real transactions exist to sample. And the ISO 9001 2026 transition audit is booked for the 4th quarter. Complete a full system internal audit against the 2026 requirements by the 3rd quarter. That one is the dress rehearsal, and its whole value lies in happening before the real thing. The program also carries its own risks and opportunities, and the program manager is expected to identify and manage them. On the risk side, auditor unavailability, when the one person competent for a scope is on leave or has left. Schedule collapse, when audits slip quarter after quarter until the year ends with a scramble. And cozy familiarity, the same auditor auditing the same area for years until they stop seeing it. On the opportunity side, combining audits, so one visit covers quality, environment, and safety instead of 3 separate disturbances. And using audit results deliberately as an improvement input, rather than filing them. Notice these are risks to the program, not to the processes. It is a distinction people routinely miss, and it shows up in quizzes. Now to what I think is the 2026 edition's most practical upgrade, the method decision. Audit method is a per-audit decision, driven by risk, by scope, and by the quality of the evidence you can obtain. It is not decided by tradition, and it is not decided by the travel budget alone. Before 2026, remote auditing sat in most people's minds as the thing you did when you could not travel. The revision moves it to a first-class option that you choose, on purpose, when it gives you better or equal evidence. Here is a working heuristic. Put process risk and criticality on one axis, and how digital and verifiable the evidence is on the other. Where the process is physical and the risk is high, go on site. There is no substitute. Where the process is digital and the risk is high, run a hybrid. Remote, but with live system access, so you are watching the real system rather than a screenshot someone prepared. Where the process is physical, but the risk is low, hybrid the other way round. Do the document work remotely and make one short, focused site visit for the part that needs eyes. And where the process is digital and the risk is low, remote is simply the right answer. Faster, cheaper, and no worse. This is a heuristic, not a rule. But if you cannot say which quadrant an audit sits in, you have not made the method decision yet. You have inherited it. Let us be precise about what each method can actually reach. Remote methods work when evidence is digital and verifiable. Documents, records, system demonstrations, data analytics, and interviews conducted by video. If the evidence lives in a system and you can see the system, distance costs you very little. On-site remains irreplaceable where the evidence is physical and contextual. Workshop conditions. Behavior. The body language around a sensitive question, which is often the most informative thing in the room. The actual state of the quarantine cage, as opposed to its state in the photograph. Hybrid designs combine the two deliberately. Remote document and data work first, so you arrive informed, then a focused site presence for exactly what only presence can verify. Whatever method you choose, plan for its failure modes, because each one has them. Connectivity. A remote audit that drops out halfway through a system demonstration has to be rescheduled, and you should decide in advance what happens to the evidence you had gathered. Data protection and confidentiality. When someone shares a screen, everything on that screen is shared, including the windows they forgot about. Recording consent. If you intend to record, you agree it beforehand, in writing, and you say what happens to the recording afterwards. And the one that catches inexperienced remote auditors most often. A guided camera shows you what the guide chooses to show you. On-site, you can turn your own head. On a video call, you are looking through someone else's eyes, and you must compensate for that deliberately by asking to see specific things rather than accepting the tour. The program needs resources. And this is where good intentions usually die. It needs a manager with defined authority and, importantly, with access to top management, because a program manager who cannot escalate cannot protect the program. It needs competent auditors, and enough of them to preserve independence. If you have one auditor, that auditor eventually has to audit their own work, and independence is gone. It needs time actually protected in diaries, not merely allocated on paper. An audit day that any operational emergency can consume is not a resourced audit day. It needs tools, checklists, work documents, and platforms for remote work. And it needs budget where travel or external support is genuinely required. Then there are the records the program must retain, and there are 4 groups. The program itself, together with its rationale. And the rationale matters more than the schedule, because it is the rationale that demonstrates risk-based thinking. The individual audit records, auditor competence and evaluation records, and the program review results. Taken together, that is the file which answers a certification auditor when they say, "Show me how your internal audit program is managed." If you can hand over those 4 things, the conversation is short. If you can only hand over a schedule, it will not be. Now the part most programs skip, monitoring. You are monitoring 3 things. Whether audits actually happen as scheduled, the simplest measure, and the one that quietly fails first. Whether they achieve their objectives, which is a different question from whether they happened, and whether they are delivered competently. The 2 practical instruments for that last one are auditee feedback and report quality. Auditee feedback is not a popularity contest. You are asking whether the auditor was prepared, fair, and clear. Report quality you can assess yourself. Were the findings evidenced? Were they written so someone could act on them? Did they arrive on time? Review the program at the end of each cycle and ask a genuinely open question. Did it serve its objectives? Then ask the question that only the program level can answer. What did the findings reveal in aggregate? Themes. Repeat offenders. Systemic weaknesses that no single audit could ever see because each individual audit saw only one instance of them. That aggregate view is the highest value output the program produces, and it is routinely thrown away. Feed the review into management review. ISO 9001's Clause 9.3 expects audit results to be there, and feed it into next cycle's program, so the shape of next year's schedule reflects what this year taught you. Which gives us the second sentence worth memorizing from this module. A program that never changes shape in response to its own results is not being managed. It is being repeated. If you put this year's program next to last year's, and they are identical, that is not evidence of stability. It is evidence that nothing you learned made any difference. So what will a certification body actually check when it evaluates your internal audit program? Exactly this module, point by point. Risk-based scheduling with visible rationale, not just a schedule, but the reasoning behind it. Method decisions made deliberately and defensible when questioned. Auditor independence and competence evidenced, not asserted. Results reaching management review. And the program learning from itself. The fastest credibility killer, and I want you to remember this one specifically, is a program document that is identical for 3 consecutive years. Nothing signals an unmanaged program faster. Here is the practical version of everything we have covered, and it fits on one page. Build a matrix. Your process is down the side, and across the top the 4 inputs, criticality, change, history, and maturity, leading to 4 outputs, frequency, depth, method, and auditor. Fill it in, then update it at each program review with a dated rationale line explaining what changed and why. That single artifact demonstrates risk-based program management faster than any amount of procedure text because it shows the thinking rather than describing it. If you build one thing after this module, build this. Let us gather the module up. The program decides targets, timing, depth, method, and auditors, and weak programs waste strong auditors. Program objectives should serve organizational objectives. Audit everything annually is a habit, not an objective. Schedule from criticality, change, history, and maturity, and manage the program's own risks and opportunities alongside them. On-site, remote, or hybrid is a per-audit decision based on risk and evidence quality, and whichever you choose, you plan for that method's failure modes. Retain the program records, rationale, audit records, auditor competence, review results, and review the program against its objectives and let it learn, because aggregate findings see what single audits never can. That is Module 2. Before you move on, reread Module 2 in the study guide, in particular the scheduling table and the method matrix, both of which are working tools rather than illustrations. Read Clause 5 in your licensed copy of the standard. Then take the Module 2 quiz. 10 questions. Pass mark 80% with a fresh attempt after targeted restudy if you fall short. Module 3 brings us down from the program to a single audit and to the work that decides whether it succeeds before anyone walks into the opening meeting. Objectives, scope, criteria, and preparation.